So we're all trying to navigate life, right? Trying to hit our potential, deal with challenges. What if, like, a huge part of that comes down to your mindset?
Exactly, yeah.
Today, we're diving into some really interesting research about how our beliefs, about our own abilities can basically shape everything. Success, setbacks, the lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the sources we looked at really boil it down to two main ways of thinking. There's the fixed mindset that's believing your abilities are pretty much set in stone.
Right, like you've got what you've got.
Yeah. And then there's the growth mindset. That's the idea that abilities can be developed, through hard work, dedication, learning.
It sounds simple on the surface, but the knock-on effects seem massive.
Oh, they really are. They ripple out into, pretty much every part of life.
You know what really grabbed me from the material? These examples of people who, nobody thought were destined for greatness initially.
Oh, yeah, those are fascinating.
Like Charles Darwin, Leo Tolstoy, apparently seen as pretty ordinary kids.
Yeah.
And Ben Hogan, one of the golfing greats, right? Apparently super uncoordinated when he started.
That's hard to picture now, isn't it?
Totally. Or Cindy Sherman, the photographer, failing her first photo course. And Geraldine Page, the actress, being told flat out she should just quit.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? It challenges that whole idea of just innate talent being the only thing that matters.
Definitely.
And that's kind of the core of the growth mindset idea, isn't it? The potential isn't some, fixed thing you're born with. It unfolds through passion, effort, sticking with it.
So our mission today really is to untack these two mindsets, look at the differences, see how they affect learning, relationships,
Leadership, sports.
yeah, the whole gamut.
And hopefully offer you listening a new way to think about your own potential for growth.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's dig in. What are the absolute core beliefs separating these two mindsets?
Well, the fixed mindset, fundamentally, it's driven by this worry about being judged.
People with this view think their intelligence, their personality, their talents, they're just inherent traits. Not much you can do to change them.
So they're always kind of performing, trying to prove themselves.
Exactly. Performance mode, every situation is a test. And mistakes. Or setbacks. They feel like proof of your limits, like your whole self-worth is on the line.
Wow, that sounds stressful. So it's all about showing off what you already have, not building something new.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now flip that. The growth mindset, it's fueled by wanting to improve.
Right.
These individuals genuinely believe, they can develop their abilities. Hard work, learning from others, trying new strategies.
So challenges aren't scary, they're interesting.
Opportunities, opportunities to grow. Your current ability is just the starting point, not the final word. And this changes how you take in information too.
How so?
Well, someone with a growth mindset is way more open to feedback, even, critical feedback.
Because it helps them get better.
Exactly. It's data for improvement. Whereas if you have a fixed mindset, negative feedback just feels like confirmation of your flaws. You might distort it, deny it even.
That makes perfect sense. If you think you're stuck, criticism just reinforces it. If you think you can grow, criticism is actually, useful.
Yeah, incredibly useful. And the sources mention this applying to both, like intelligence mindset, our mental abilities, and personality mindset for character, social skills, that kind of thing.
Same principle, different domain.
Exactly. Fixed versus growth thinking applies across the board. So, okay, let's look at how this actually plays out, like when you're learning something new or tackling something really difficult.
Yeah, I'm keen to hear about this. How does it affect resilience when things get tough?
Well, the research shows a really stark difference. They did these studies with kids and challenging puzzles.
Okay.
Kids with a fixed mindset, even if they liked the puzzles at first, their enjoyment just plummeted when it got hard.
Really? They just gave up.
Some did, or they started avoiding the harder puzzles. It's like the challenge itself felt threatening. It might expose that they weren't naturally smart, which is what they value.
Even the kids who were initially good at it.
Especially sometimes. Because that early success creates this pressure, to keep looking effortlessly brilliant. Any struggle feels like a failure of that gift.
Right, like that example of Loretta, the girl whose whole school path was kind of set by one early test result.
Exactly. That kind of thing reinforces this fixed idea. Perform well now, because this moment defines you. A single evaluation feels permanent.
So a stumble isn't a learning moment, it's like a final verdict.
That's the fixed mindset view, yeah. Now, contrast that with a growth mindset, kids facing the same hard puzzles.
What did they do?
They generally stayed engaged. The difficulty wasn't a threat. It was like an interesting problem.
Oof. Okay, this is tricky. What else can I try? It's a chance to stretch themselves.
And this isn't just kids, right? You mentioned pre-med students, right? The studies found pre-med students with growth mindsets were much more proactive. If they struggled, they didn't just feel defeated. They sought out extra help, different study methods, took charge of mastering the material.
They saw setbacks as part of the process.
Exactly. Obstacles weren't roadblocks. They were signals to maybe try a different route.
Pathways to improvement.
That's a good way to put it. And you see this in how students explain their grades too. Junior high kids with fixed mindsets, if they got poor grades, they'd often say things like, well, I'm just not good at math. Or they'd blame the teacher.
Focusing on inherent lack of ability or external factors.
Yeah, explaining it away rather than figuring out what they could do differently. It can lead to this feeling of, like, learned helplessness.
That sounds incredibly limiting.
It really is. But the growth mindset students in the same boat, their focus was on strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, that didn't work. What do I need to do differently next time? How should I study?
So different study habits too.
Definitely. Fixed mindset often meant just rereading notes, maybe memorizing facts. If that didn't work, the conclusion was, well, I guess I just don't have the aptitude.
Whereas the growth mindset.
They'd try different things, concept mapping, practice problems, study groups. They saw a poor result not as a label, but as a sign they needed a new approach.
It's so clear how the growth mindset fosters a more proactive and adaptable way of learning. Okay, let's shift gears. Relationships. That's not the first place I think mindset plays a role.
Oh, but it's huge.
Yeah.
Often really subtle, but profound. See, in relationships, a fixed mindset can cause a lot of friction, especially if partners have different ideas about what makes a relationship work.
Like what?
Well, maybe one person thinks love means total, unquestioning acceptance. The other thinks it means, confronting problems head on.
Okay.
If both have fixed mindsets, they might see these differences not as preferences or skills to be negotiated, but as fundamental, unchangeable flaws in the partner.
Ah, so you're judging the person's core character, not the specific behavior or communication gap.
Exactly. It becomes about evaluating their fixed traits. He's just inconsiderate, or she's just too critical. This breeds resentment, contempt even. The source mentioned Penelope, remember her?
Vaguely. She dismissed partners quickly.
Yeah, based on perceived fixed flaws. A tacky gift, an annoying laugh. Things that, might just be quirks or habits, not necessarily deal breakers you can't talk about or adapt to. She saw them as immutable signs they weren't the one.
Right, seeing it as fixed, not something you could potentially work through or accept. That sounds like a recipe for dissatisfaction.
It often is. But couples with a growth mindset, they're more likely to see problems not as proof of their partner's inherent flaws, but as, relationship challenges.
Things to be solved together.
Exactly. Communication issues, differences in needs. They see these as chances to understand each other better, to develop skills together. Like Brenda and Jack, the example. Instead of labeling each other when they misunderstood something.
They could see it as a chance to get better at communicating with each other.
Precisely. The focus shifts. It's not about, is this person fundamentally flawed, but how can we learn and grow through this?
That makes sense.
Fixed mindsets can also create this weird competition in relationships. A need to be right, to prove you're smarter or better.
Oh dear.
Yeah, whereas a growth mindset fosters mutual support, helping each other develop, learning to navigate differences constructively, like Laura and James, supporting each other's individual growth, and growing the relationship itself.
That sounds much healthier. A partnership, not a contest. Okay, what about the boardroom? Leadership, business. How does mindset show up there?
Well, the sources talk about something called CEO disease. Doesn't sound good, does it?
No, definitely not. What's that about?
It's kind of presented as a fixed mindset trap for leaders.
Where?
Lee Iacocca at Chrysler is used as an example. Hugely successful early on.
Right, save the company.
Yeah, but then the argument goes, he became resistant to new ideas, kind of stuck in his ways, relying on past glories, even when things change. It's like the success solidified this belief in his own inherent genius, making it hard to keep learning and adapting.
So success became a kind of cage, reinforcing a fixed view of his own brilliance.
That's the idea. A sort of intellectual stagnation born from wanting to protect that image of infallibility. Now compare that to leaders with more of a growth mindset. Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark is mentioned.
Okay.
Even after huge success, he apparently said he never stopped trying to be qualified for the job. That's humility, right? A constant focus on learning, improving, acknowledging you don't have all the answers.
It's about continuous improvement, not resting on your laurels. A learning culture from the top down.
Exactly. And CEOs constantly face this tension, don't they? Short-term results versus long-term health.
Boosting the stock price now versus investing for the future.
Right. And a fixed mindset leader might lean towards those short-term wins because they provide validation. They make the leader look good right now. Albert Dunlap is given as a cautionary tale there. Chainsaw Al. Focused on quick cuts and personal image over sustainable growth. That's the narrative presented, yeah. Short-sighted glory. And that research in Good to Great. It found that the really exceptional long-term leaders were often more self-effacing, focused on growth, humble.
Not the genius with 1,000 helpers model.
Exactly. That genius model often aligns more with a fixed mindset. Think about Lou Gerstner turning IBM around. His approach was described as very growth-oriented, fostering teamwork, really listening to customers, breaking down hierarchies, not just imposing his singular vision.
Building capability throughout the organization.
Yes. And there was even that study with business students, wasn't there? Showing how different mindsets led to management styles that kind of mirrored Enron's fixed hierarchical culture versus a more adaptable, growth-focused one like Wurzel's.
So it's not just about the individual leader. It really shapes the whole organization's ability to adapt and thrive.
Okay, let's switch arenas again. Sports. This is where everyone talks about naturals, right? Raw talent.
Oh, absolutely. The myth of the natural athlete is huge. But the sources really push back on that being the whole story.
How so?
Well, even if you do have natural talent, a fixed mindset can seriously hold you back. Billy being the Moneyball guy is presented as someone like that.
Really? He was a top prospect, wasn't he?
Hugely talented, yeah. But apparently, his fixed mindset, his intense fear of failing to live up to that natural talent label, made it incredibly hard for him to cope with setbacks in his playing career.
So the pressure of being the natural actually became a burden.
It can be paralyzing, yeah. Contrast him with someone like Lenny Dykstra. Maybe not the same level of raw physical gifts, but incredible resilience, a growth mindset.
Just kept bouncing back.
Exactly. Failure wasn't the end of the world. It was part of the game, something to learn from. Even Babe Ruth. We think of him as this pure natural force. Yeah, hot dogs and home runs.
Right. But the sources point out he actually worked incredibly hard on his conditioning and practice, especially when he was struggling or facing new challenges. It wasn't just natural ability.
It really shows that even the most gifted need that grind, that effort.
Absolutely. And sometimes being labeled naturally talented early on can almost be a curse. It might lead to a fixed mindset where you start to avoid the hard work because struggle doesn't fit the image. Bruce Jenner's experience was mentioned in this context.
Interesting.
But then you have these powerful examples of athletes with growth mindsets overcoming enormous hurdles. Michael Jordan's legendary work ethic.
Practicing constantly.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar completely adapting his game when the rules changed to limit his dominance. Jackie Joyner-Kersee battling asthma and injuries to become one of the greatest ever.
Just pure perseverance.
And Mia Hamm always talking about needing to improve, never being satisfied. Their focus wasn't on protecting a natural status. It was always on getting better, pushing limits.
These are amazing stories of grit.
They really are. And you see the contrast in behavior too. Fixed mindset in sports can look like needing to prove superiority, maybe through arrogance or outbursts, like John McEnroe sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas the growth mindset is about effort, personal best, developing your skills, even in teams. Growth-minded teams focus on collective effort, supporting each other, learning from losses. The Boston Red Sox turnaround was framed that way.
Right, building a different culture.
In Diane and I's incredible swim, she always emphasized the massive team effort behind her solo achievement. And that idea of being a somebody, not because you always win, but because you go for it with everything you have. Like Isis Tillis in basketball.
Giving your all, regardless of the outcome.
Exactly. Even Tiger Woods, his father, deliberately taught him a growth mindset from day one. Focus on learning, adapting, not just on having innate talent.
It totally reframes athletic success, doesn't it? It's not just about the gifts you're born with, it's about cultivating that mindset of work and improvement.
Yeah.
So the big question, how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate a growth mindset?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. And it's crucial to get this. It's not just flipping a switch. The sources warn about a false growth mindset.
What's that?
It's like adopting the language. Saying things like, oh, I believe in growth, but not actually internalizing the core beliefs or, more importantly, putting them into practice consistently when things get tough.
So just talking the talk isn't enough. You have to walk the walk.
Exactly. It takes real conscious effort. There are strategies, though. One really interesting one is becoming aware of your fixed mindset voice or persona.
That inner critic.
Yeah. The part of you that whispers judgments focuses on permanent flaws in yourself or others. The source mentioned a teacher who had her students actually name their fixed mindset voices. Scared Sally, Lazy Larry.
Huh. Giving it a name. That's clever. It makes it feel separate from you.
It does. It creates distance. You can observe it rather than just automatically believing it. So step one is learning to hear that voice.
Okay, recognize the fixed mindset thoughts. Then what?
Then you challenge them. Don't just accept those judgments as truth. Question them. Remind yourself, effort leads to growth. Challenges aren't threats, they're opportunities.
Reframe the situation.
Exactly. See setbacks not as proof you can't do it, but as valuable information. Okay, that approach didn't work. What can I learn? What can I try next? Focus on the process, the effort, the strategies, not just the outcome.
And how you talk to others matters too, right? Praising effort.
Hugely important. Praising effort and specific strategies. Wow, you worked really hard on that. That was a clever way you approached that problem. Reinforces a growth mindset much more than praising innate talent. You're so smart. You're a natural.
That simple shift, you worked hard versus you're smart, seems small, but could be powerful over time.
It really can be. And the sources also stress concrete plans. It's not just vague intentions. Set specific goals, figure out the steps, and stick to them, even when you don't feel motivated.
Like those students with depression who still benefited from taking growth-oriented actions.
Exactly. Action can sometimes lead feeling, not always the other way around. And you could bring this into your family, too. Frame discussions around learning, effort, what mistakes taught you, rather than blame or simple evaluation.
It sounds like it's a really deliberate, ongoing practice, training that internal dialogue, choosing the growth response again and again.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's a practice. So if we boil it all down, the core distinction we've been talking about is this. Fixed mindset. It's about proving yourself, seeking validation for the talent you believe you already have.
Right.
Growth mindset. It's about improving yourself, cultivating your abilities through challenge, learning, effort.
And it brings us right back to those examples at the start. Darwin, Tolstoy, Hogan, Sherman, Page.
Yeah. People who weren't seen as naturals, but achieved incredible things through that passion, toil, and training.
It really drives home that our potential,
Yeah.
it's often way more flexible, more malleable than we think. It's waiting to be shaped by our effort and how we approach things.
Absolutely. So for you listening, maybe the final thought to take away, think about one area in your life, just one where you tend to slip into that fixed mindset. Maybe a skill you've avoided, a type of conversation, something at work.
Yeah.
What's one small thing, one concrete step you could take today to approach it differently? With a growth perspective, focus not on judging yourself or fearing failure, but just on the process of learning, developing, seeing what you might grow into.
That's a great challenge. Here's to exploring that journey, that potential for growth. Thanks for diving deep with us today.